is one hot topic everywhere at the moment: intuitive eating. You don't have to go on a diet, you don't stress. Sounds like the perfect solution.
Oh, sounds great. Yeah. There's just a little bit of a problem. We were talking about fish and chips, and we were like,
Really want
my
fish and
intuition
chips.
is telling me I want fish and chips right now. You know what I mean?
The problem is, like, if you've been on a diet for as long as you can remember, wildly under eating on calories for a couple of weeks and then going crazy because the diet's over, how is your body supposed to know how to intuitively eat normally?
I'm eating all these healthy foods and I'm listening to my body, but you're eating 1,500 calories more than your maintenance. So you're gaining like half a pound of body fat a week, which is not healthy. You've also got to be actually self-aware enough to know your hunger and fullness cues. Most people don't. We've all done that, open the fridge 20 times and we know there's nothing new in the fridge. Nothing's going to magically appear back in there.
And nothing sounds good because you're not hungry.
Yeah.
You can't just rely on your intuition. This changed my life when I realised that.
Hi, I'm Jaymie.
And I'm Stacey.
And this is the Body Smart Podcast.
We are women's weight loss experts on a mission to empower you to take control of your weight and your health for good. And there is one hot topic when it comes to that idea of being in control of your weight and your health that's really going around everywhere at the moment, and that is intuitive eating.
Yes.
And it sounds like the perfect solution, doesn't it? It's like you just know what your body wants. Mm-hmm. You eat that. You don't have to go on a diet. You don't stress. And actually, if you think about it, we all know that person who's naturally thin, doesn't ever worry about food, has never been on a diet in their life. Like, why wouldn't you want that to be yours?
Sounds great. Yeah. Sounds fantastic. And literally all of our graduates intuitively eat. When they become graduates, me and you intuitively eat. It's that holy grail of like, oh, that seems to be the thing that we should be doing or need to do. There's just a little bit of a problem with some of the approaches.
Well, the problem is, like, if you've been on a diet for as long as you can remember and you've been confusing your body with like wildly under eating on calories for a couple of weeks and then going crazy because the diet's over for a couple of weeks, cutting out whole food groups, how is your body supposed to know how to intuitively eat, in inverted commas, normally? Because you haven't had that experience. You
haven't, and your hunger and fullness cues are probably completely out of whack in terms of like what's actually normal. And then there's other big parts of that when it comes to just like education around food. And I think the way people get really like hung up on this, it's like, oh well, my friend intuitively eats and she's always slim or he's always slim and they don't seem to gain weight and I see them eating pizza. But you can honestly look at a lot of these people sometimes, and if you stuck a GoPro to their head and seen everything that they ate, you'd be surprised they probably manage their hunger and fullness and balance out their calories throughout the day, or maybe fidget more and move more. And there's actually, you can see it within their behavior of like, oh, that's why you believe that person has a fast metabolism, or that's why that person actually...
They can intuitively eat because they've got those habits. And in principle, we're totally on board. Like you said, we both intuitively eat. We teach all of our graduates how to intuitively eat. There are a lot of good tools and habits and skills that you can learn as part of intuitive eating that are going to serve you for the rest of your life. And absolutely everybody should know how to do that. I think the issue comes where intuitive eating is like positioned as it's either that or lose weight, because it seems to be like a big thing in the approach that you can't lose weight and intuitively eat. And actually that is probably correct, because your body is designed for homeostasis, which means it's designed to try and stay as you are, because it's really helpfully trying to keep you alive. So if it naturally, intuitively made you eat in a calorie deficit, you would eventually die.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be a great evolutionary method.
Not quite, yeah.
So actually, they're not wrong when they say you can't intuitively eat and effectively lose weight.
But I think the reason most people are looking at this like intuitive eating as the holy grail is like they want to do it and look good and feel good and be a healthy weight. So there's just like a bit of a crossroads around principles there. And there is like a lot of people who are like on the like anti-diet side of things, like push intuitively eating heavily. But I think they just miss out some real core principles, which is you've got to have at least a baseline understanding around foods and food education and awareness. And you've also got to be actually self-aware enough to know your hunger and fullness cues, which most people don't. And if you've been overweight for a long period of your life, you probably are not as close to that as you may think you are. Most of the people we've spoke about before who have got that probably grew up with good hunger and fullness cues and probably were taught that by their parents. And when they got to like halfway through the plate, they're like, hey, if you're full, honey, stop eating. You know what I mean? And they would just stop and
Those intuitive eaters were being encouraged from day one.
yeah, not going, hey, like if there's kids in Africa who haven't got any food, eat your whole plate and you force some food down, going against your natural hunger and fullness cues. And like that's waste. And you know, there's lots of different reasons and we can all look at that like objectively, what's happened, what hasn't. But like to intuitively eat, you need to have a pretty solid baseline level of education around food.
Yeah.
And be really in tune with your hunger and fullness cues. And most people are not.
But what we're going to cover today is the skills and habits that you need to improve that awareness and the principles of intuitive eating, because there is a lot of curiosity and there is a lot of merit to it. And actually, it is the goal destination for all of our Body Smart graduates. We want them to graduate intuitively eating. So luckily, we know how to get there. we have a curriculum on it. So we're going to talk you guys through each of the principles of intuitive eating and some of the habits and skills that you can develop to help you do that. So the first principle that intuitive eating movement has is reject the diet mentality. As I said, that one's where we're maybe a little bit on a different page, because if you want to lose weight, you will have to, in inverted commas, diet, as in go into a calorie deficit.
Yeah.
And you do need to know how to eat well first before you can reject all nutrition information from other sources. You can't just rely on your intuition, because every study that's tested like this unconditional permission to eat whatever you feel like, people make poorer choices.
That makes sense. We were just saying it before, like we were talking about fish and chips and we were like,
really
my intuition is telling me I want fish and chips right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, I know if we went and ate fish and chips, we're probably going to knock back like 2,000 calories for lunch. And it's like, you know.
Yeah. And the other thing is, like, there are so many foods that are designed to make you want more. Mm-hmm. So it's not even like we're playing on a level playing field of if people tried to intuitively eat 100 years ago, it would probably be much easier.
So much easier, yeah. Like when you're eating all the whole foods, like your natural satiety levels kick in so much more. You start eating Oreos or chips from a chip shop in the UK. French fries. You just keep going. And those foods are made by design in that way. They're highly palatable, full of fat, salt, sugar, and you can just keep eating and eating and eating. Like you feel like you are just this endless like bucket that can't be filled. And again, that food is made like that by design.
Yeah.
You try to do that with whole foods, you'll get pretty full pretty quick.
Yeah. So that's why we would always start with a structured nutrition plan, and we wouldn't actually call it a diet. Like we're not saying to people, oh, come and join Body Smart, be on a diet. Like we're actually saying we're going to teach you how to eat well and give your body what it needs. So the main things that you want to be focusing on is 80-20. So that means 80% of your food's from that whole food basis. So instead of having the fries, you'd have potatoes, because actually there is a limit to how many plain potatoes you could comfortably eat.
On the satiety chart, I think they're like rated as one of the highest satiating foods that you can eat.
Yeah.
So yeah, but like again, a plain potato, I mean, you could even add a little bit of butter and salt to it. It's still nice. But like how much you could eat of them versus how much you could eat of like French fries, or even if you go a step further, we say crisps, they say chips. Like you can, like Doritos, oh my God, you can knock back the big bag of them with the what is it? The
dip.
The dips. So yeah, again, as you're just looking at the process level. So yeah, 80% coming from the whole foods, potatoes, 20% coming from a little bit of the processed foods.
Yeah, like we're not saying never have fries, but have a little bit of balance towards the whole foods. So that's your 80-20. The other thing is to get sufficient protein and fiber in your diet.
Easy way to look at this, go over to bodysmartfitness.com, do the calorie quiz on there. That's going to give you your calorie and protein goal. We recommend 1 gram of protein per pound of lean body mass. And then when it comes to fiber, just like a baseline, just look at 30 grams. Like if you're not getting 30 grams, just start there. If you're eating more than 2,000 calories a day, aiming to possibly get a little bit more than that, like 15 grams per 1,000 calories, is a good baseline to go off. But I think
for most women, that would look like 20-25 grams a day.
Yeah, and if you go on our calorie quiz and get your protein goal, and then just get 30 grams of protein, like just off hitting your protein,
Fiber.
and just off getting your protein from the calorie quiz and then hitting 30 grams of fiber, you will notice like you are way more full than you used to be because of the type of foods you're going to have to eat to get that in.
And I think this is where there's nuance and there's balance, because intuitive eating would say reject the diet mentality. That is their actual wording. We're actually saying, to be fair, we probably agree, like reject those fad diets, stop cutting out carbs, stop going on crazy low calories. We kind of agree, but equally there are some guidelines that will be better for your health and make eating well easier. So that's going to be 80-20 protein and fiber.
Yeah.
Cool. Principle number 2, recognize your hunger. And this one is huge. This is what you were just touching on, like hunger and fullness.
Well, I mean, in the book, what's it called? Michael Easter's book, The Comfort Crisis. Yeah, so he talks about that the way like 80-90% of hunger nowadays is psychological and only 10 or 20% is physiological. So most people, when they're getting hungry nowadays, they're not actually hungry. They're psychologically, there's a driver behind that. And that's why we come up with the acronym BLASTED, which is, are you bored, lonely, anxious, stressed, tired, emotional, or distracted? And that's it. Like if you're working from home and you've had a couple of meetings, it's like, just go downstairs, make a cup of coffee. I'll have a biscuit. Like you tell yourself you're hungry. You're possibly just a bit bored with work, or you're just a bit, it could be lots of different things. You could have been stressed out from work and you turn into food. But really understanding if there are psychological drivers that are driving you towards your hunger. And that's where, again, intuitive eating can get really confusing, because you're like, oh, I feel hungry. And it's like, you're not hungry. You're stressed. And you turn into food to dampen that feeling of stress. I'm masking it with food.
And you've never picked apart that sensation before.
Yeah.
It can feel the same, because basically your brain is just sending a signal that says, go get food. And to you, that signal means I am hungry. When actually you peel back the layers, why is it saying go get food? That's what we need to ask.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think is really important, like you touched on, was those childhood habits, or the way that we pick up patterns of eating. So it might be because your parents had told you to clear your plate. It might be because you only get a fixed lunch break at work, and whether you're hungry or not, you're going to have to eat at that time. So you've done that for 15 years and your body doesn't really know whether it's hungry or not. You just have to eat because it's that time. Not drinking water because you don't have access to a bathroom at work maybe, or when you're out and about. And then that messes up your hunger signals because you haven't been drinking enough water. And then also thinking about like peer pressure and social situations. So how many times have you accepted a cookie or a piece of cake or something at a party or in the office just because you feel like it would be rude not to?
Yeah.
And if somebody's cooked a meal for you, you think, oh, I better eat it all because I don't want to offend them that I didn't like it. And so you keep eating. There are so many elements that affect what we eat that it just becomes quietened down. Our actual intuition, our actual hunger level just is irrelevant in a lot of situations. We eat to other external cues.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and that's the whole point of like going through this exercise, is to just like the first step with any of this is always to just raise that level of awareness. So if you can start to raise awareness around maybe some psychological drivers around hunger, or in certain situations where you're maybe the behaviors that you have aren't serving your hunger and fullness cues and are taking you out of tune with it, or if you are feeling pressure in certain situations, just that first level is like awareness. Like, oh, I do just eat way past comfortable when I'm at Susie's house each month or whatever else. You know what I mean? And you can go, okay, maybe I actually want to be more in tune with that. Maybe I can say, hey, can I have a smaller portion next time? And you could just ask that. Or you can just not eat all your food, and set that boundary. Like, oh no, the meal was lovely. I'm just full.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. But it's, again, you have to, most of us and most people listening are just willfully and ignorantly to an extent, just don't know any better. And that's not your...
Because we've dialed it down.
Yeah, it's not necessarily your fault. It's just like, this is where we say it's not necessarily your fault, but it is your responsibility. You just don't know. So once you raise that level of awareness and you start asking these questions and you get curious, then it allows you to go into those situations and be like, maybe I'm going to try and get a different outcome out of this. And then you start to, and you're like, okay, and you can start making more informed decisions.
And one of the really helpful tools that we use with our clients is called the Hunger Rainbow. And I think it really highlights that lack of awareness when you first do it. So we draw on a piece of paper, like a rainbow, 1 on the left and 10 on the right. And 1 means you're so empty, you're so hungry, you're prepared to fight someone to the death for some food. Like 10, you're so full, you feel sick, you can't move.
Yeah.
So most of us can visualize like a time in our lives where we felt something close to that 1 and that 10. Now try and fill in the gaps. Like, what does a 2 feel like? What does a 9 feel like? And fill those gaps in. Most people are going to have a very grey middle section where they're not really aware of what maybe like a 4, 5, 6, 7 even feels like. Like, what's the difference between a 4 and a 7? They don't really know.
Yeah.
And so actually, if you wanted to respect your hunger, you would never really go past a 4. You wouldn't get into that like starving mode. And you also would never really want to go into that stuffed, feeling horrible and like over bloated.
Yeah.
But you don't know what the middle bit feels like. So a really key thing you can do then over the next couple of days and weeks is keep that rainbow in the back of your mind. And as the day goes on, just start to notice, like, does my tummy rumble? Do my thoughts start to go to food? Do I get saliva in my mouth? Do I like get irritable? What are the things, and like where would I place that? So it is very intentional, and it is a exercise, but it is priceless to then say, actually, I know where I'm aiming to be in day-to-day life. I don't ever want to go below this point.
Yeah, we've got, if anyone wants this Hunger Rainbow chart, if you just DM us on Instagram and say, can you send me the rainbow chart, we'll get one of the team to send it out to you, because it's really a useful tool to have saved and to look at and to really try and work out. I'm going to ask Sai to find me something here, because this is in one of our previous episodes about the blue zones, which is well worth a listen and worth a watch if you want to watch a TV show. But they talk about in Japan, like one of the, it's in line with
they only eat to 80% full.
I think they've got like a name for it. It's like it's on alignment with like Kaizen and Ikigai.
Yeah, it's like one of their principles.
It's one of those sort of principles, and the big one that they have is like only eat to like 70-80% fullness. And like, yeah, it plays into that hunger rainbow of just like getting, like, know your body enough to say like, I'm full enough. And I think a part of this as well plays into, I'm hoping this is one of the further points down, is probably mindful eating. So I used to just like, and still kind of do a little bit at times, but just eat so fast to the point where like I'd eat all my food, I'd be like, I'm still hungry, I'm gonna go and get more food. But now, if I have eaten too fast, I can kind of recognize it and go, you're not actually hungry. Just you haven't even processed that you've just eaten that amount of food, and I'll just wait 10 minutes, and then I'm like, oh my God, I'm so full. So it's...
So the Japanese concept is called harahachi banmi.
What?
I've probably just absolutely ruined how you're supposed to say that.
You said that really well.
But if you Google it, Japanese 80% full concept, you'll be able to do further research. But yeah, what you're saying is absolutely true, and there are cliches which are based in evidence that it does take around 20 minutes for your food to actually register, not just in your stomach physically, but your brain, your taste buds, everything. And what's really interesting, actually, going back to that Blue Zone episode, is everything or a lot of their meals were home cooked.
Yeah.
And your digestive system actually starts working from the smell of home cooking. So if you think about how we used to live, you were cooking or your mum was cooking and your brain was like, oh, we're about to get food. Okay, right, let's prime our digestive system. By the time you sit down and start eating, it's ready to receive. It's ready to like start recognizing fullness. Whereas we're just rushing around. We grab something cold. We sit at a table. If we even step away from our desk, we smash it back and we carry on.
Yeah.
It's completely different.
That is literally me today. I brought 2 wraps in and I just ate them at my desk while I was still working.
I can visualize them going like a cartoon.
Yeah. And again, like, there's a time and a place, but these are definitely things to just like become aware of if you're wanting to successfully intuitively eat.
Yeah. And we have varied a little bit here into the 5th principle of intuitive eating, which is feel your fullness.
Yes.
So I just want to come back to the hunger one, which is what we were on, number 2. Because the other thing that we really hammer home to our clients is if you're genuinely hungry, eat. Like, if you are actually physically hungry and because you've figured out what your body feels like and it is like a tummy rumbling, it's not just a thought of a certain food, eat. Because otherwise you are just going to sit there thinking about your tummy rumbling and you're maybe going to put it off for an hour. and you're still going to be hungry, and you're going to eat way more, and
Yeah.
you might even eat something that you really wouldn't have done if you'd eaten at the beginning of the hunger.
Yeah. And I would just say, like, make sure whatever you go and eat is, like, nourishing. And because if you go and eat something that's really nourishing, it's going to, your stomach rumbling's going to go, and you're going to feel full off the back of it.
Yeah.
Just don't go like, oh, I'm hungry, and then you go and grab the quickest snack. That's going to just continue to lead to probably more and more eating.
Oh, that just reminded me of 2 things. One, this changed my life. When I realized that my brain telling me I was hungry did not mean emergency, eat now. Because that's what I thought for years. I was like, oh, it just means you should probably eat something soon. Life-changing. So if you're listening and your brain thinks that, a hunger signal means emergency, eat now, it's just like a little signal. It's not a immediate request.
Yeah.
And that can change, like you said, what you end up going for. And you can rationalize, do you know what, I don't need to eat immediately. As long as I've got a plan to grab something in the next 10, 15 minutes, that's fine. And you'll make a better choice.
Yeah.
And the other one it reminded me of was I had a client who she nicknamed this, she made this thing up as like this little test in her head. She was like, the turkey test. If I'm truly hungry, then the idea of just a piece of like lean turkey breast would sound good. Or like a piece of plain broccoli.
It's true though, isn't it? Yeah, like when you are starving, anything anything sounds good. But then after you're completely full, actually the desire to eat isn't even that high.
And if you contrast that to those times where you've walked to the kitchen and you've opened the cupboard and you've stood there looking for inspiration,
I mean, we've all done that. Open the fridge 20 times and we know there's nothing new in the fridge. Nothing's going to magically appear back in there.
And nothing sounds good. And like nothing is going, yeah, that'll solve my hunger, because you're not hungry.
Yeah.
That's the difference of the turkey test. So if you are genuinely hungry, maybe ask yourself if a piece of plain broccoli or an apple or a piece of turkey would do the job. If so, go eat. If it's not, and it's just like standing in front of the cupboard or the fridge.
Ask yourself, blasted.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Ask yourself what else is going on. So that was principle number 2, recognize your hunger. Principle number 3 is make peace with food. No foods are off limits. Again, something we agree with pretty much.
Yeah, we speak about this all the time in the podcast, which is, majority of your foods coming from whole, nutrient-dense, minimally processed foods, and the minority of your diet coming from a little bit of what you love. If you kind of stick to that as a baseline principle, you're going to be in a good place. Yeah, I'd say it's probably for most people the other way around.
Yeah.
Especially when you look at like how processed most foods are nowadays, and 50-60% of people's diets is coming from ultra processed foods.
Even things that are labeled healthy, just because they're labeled healthy doesn't mean that they're whole foods. And the processing is what affects like the digestive rate and the actual level of nutrients that's going to be in that food.
Yeah.
The other thing that is important to understand with this is when it says all foods are allowed, none are off limits, is when you take away those restrictions of like, I'm not allowed donuts. We were actually talking about this earlier, weren't we? When you find like, well, I can have a donut, and it's not this like on a pedestal special food that you only have in certain occasions, and you just have a donut and you eat it and you're like, it's not actually that great.
Yeah. We see it all the time with clients because they've had such a restrictive mindset with food for ages. You can't have that donut, you can't have this chocolate, you've got to be on the strict, you can't eat bread. And it's like, can't. And it makes them want it more and more and more. And eventually, willpower caves. They overindulge, and because they feel like they can't have it, they completely binge and overdo it. Versus we're coming in like, yeah, you can factor that into your calories. Yeah, have the bread, have the donut. And then after a while, like, they have it, they indulge in that. They keep making progress. Like, donuts on one donut isn't going to ruin my progress. 10 donuts. It's going to have a bit more of an impact. One chocolate bar isn't, or a piece of bread. And then once you go that, you're like, didn't actually feel that great after eating a 500 calorie donut. I'd rather just have like a 200 calorie chocolate bar and just have more proper food. And then you're coming to that conclusion on your own. You don't feel like you can't have the donut. You're choosing not to have the donut and making better food choices. And that's like where like the real magic and empowerment happens.
Yeah, and that is when you are genuinely intuitively eating with a baseline of knowledge, because you're intuitively choosing not to have the donut, but you're still having something that you do want. You want it more than the donut, actually, because you're going to enjoy it more and you're going to enjoy how you feel more. Did you know we have an award-winning one-on-one coaching program designed especially for women aged over 30 who want to lose between 15 and 60 pounds? Just like this podcast, our Body Smart method cuts through all the BS out there and brings together the latest weight loss science to fast-track your weight loss. So if you want to lose 15 to 60 pounds in the next 6 months, guaranteed, or you don't pay, apply at bodysmartfitness.com.
Like we just wanted to have fish and chips.
Yeah.
And the main reason we didn't have fish and chips is because it's the middle of the day. And if we slam back 2,000 calories right now, we'd probably be falling asleep doing this podcast. And we probably aren't going to feel that great. Does that mean that we're never going to eat fish and chips again? No, it doesn't. But there's like time and a place, and you probably get more enjoyment out of it. And again, it's just making informed, intuitive decisions.
Yeah. And it does tie into the next one, which is discover true satisfaction. Something that really surprises clients is another little game we play called the taste test, which is, say you fancy fish and chips, go get your fish and chips. But every mouthful, just notice how good that fish and chips is. I'm conscious we're using an example which maybe doesn't relate because we just had an American client that we were like selling fish and chips to, and she was like, that doesn't sound that appealing. So whatever your favorite food is, as you go and get it, let's say it's ice cream. Everybody has ice cream.
Yeah.
All countries. So you're eating your ice cream. You've been really wanting this ice cream. You take the first bite and you're like, oh my God, yes, that is so good. That is as good as I remember. The next bite, you're like, yep, that's a 9 out of 10 still. You are going to get to a point where that taste and that joy and that satisfaction is a bit like,
it's a bit numbing eventually.
And for most people, it's genuinely within like the first 10 bites, it's gone from like, this is the best thing ever to like, yeah. When it gets to meh, just push it away. Like, it's not doing what you wanted it for. You're not eating ice cream for its nutritional value. You're eating it for satisfaction. Once you're not getting that satisfaction anymore, why are you eating it?
Yeah. Easier said than done. You know what I mean? Because it is. It's there is, I feel like there's sometimes this part of your brain that just kind of overrides of just like, it does for me at least sometimes, like the gluttonous side of me just comes in. But I completely agree. Like I will typically, so if you gave me like a tub of ice cream or like a large bar of chocolate, I just keep breaking off more. So like I kind of know myself well enough, like don't give me a super king size bar of chocolate. Like I'm just going to probably, I could, like if I really wanted to, I could, but it's so much willpower for me to stop. Just give me a normal bar of chocolate. I'll just have that and I'm fine. You know,
so I would say though, it is a skill that comes with practice. Because I'm saying you need to work on it. Because I used to be the same. Yeah. Whereas now, I like a glass of wine. Mm-hmm. I will even stop drinking a glass of wine if after like 3 or 4 sips, I'm not like, Yeah. I'll be like, no, I'm just not. It's just not worth it. Like, it's not because I'm worried about calories or any of that stuff. I'm just like, I just don't want it. And it's practice and it is awareness and it doesn't come easy. And in certain situations, it will be easier than others. Like if you're hungrier, things will just taste better, even if they're not that nice. If you're tired, stressed, all of those emotional factors, it will just be nicer to keep eating because you're going to get a little dopamine hit and it is going to make you feel better. But the more you practice, the more that becomes easy to just genuinely say, I'm not really enjoying it that much anymore. I'm going to stop.
Yeah.
So that can help, as well as just slowing down, like you said earlier, just giving your brain a chance to register your food. Yeah,
I think with not being distracted as well helps with that. Like if you're distracted while you're like if you're watching TV or you're on your phone, or watching anything, to be honest, you're not like actually being present with your food. You'll naturally eat like just faster typically, and you're not aware of everything that we've just been saying about enjoying the food and taste and bites and everything else. It does make like a significant difference. It really does. So that helps. And then for some of my clients, I used to just literally like, hey, just like get your stopwatch out on your phone, 10 minutes. And they'd be like, crap, I ate in like 4. I'm like, yeah, you really need to slow down. So it just like forces like, 10 minutes to eat like a meal. We just said it takes 20 minutes for digestion to kick in. But obviously if you had that, you're smelling the food while you're cooking it, or you can see it coming. Like it just helps with those natural cues that we have. But yeah, 10 minutes for a main meal is like a good goal to be
minimum.
Yeah,
minimum. The other thing that I think you said there about was distraction. you'll be surprised if you try and eat without, if you have your phone on your table without looking at the phone, how hard it is if you're used to scrolling.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I would say try that out as a challenge, because you'll go so many times you'll be like, oh shit, I am addicted to my phone.
We all are. So many of us are nowadays. So,
Yeah.
you know, having those moments when you eat or when you're doing certain activities where you are just present, it's so, for your mental health is fantastic, but especially when it comes to intuitive eating, it's really important.
Yeah. So a good goal is to say no screens whilst you're eating, step away from your desk to another place. Like, one of the other ones that I really like to use with clients as a habit is whenever you eat anything, you sit at a table. Because we all have these habits of like just grabbing a handful of this as we walk through the kitchen, or just grabbing a snack and taking it back to our desk and like continuing to work whilst we push it back. All food eaten at a table completely changes the ballgame. And intuitive eating, like hardcore people would probably be like, that's a diet rule. It's not. It's to encourage you to pay attention to your food.
Yeah.
And if you then do that and you decide, I now know how to pay attention to my food, I'm going to go back to eating at my desk. Fine. But actually, are you really acknowledging your hunger, your fullness, doing everything that you fully want to with your food if you do that?
Exactly. Yeah.
The last one is another tool that we use to help with this. We call it the How Food Feels journal. And it kind of ties into what you said earlier about like if you'd eaten the fish and chips, you know from like past experiences, you're not going to feel that great.
Yeah.
Most of us don't analyze our food choices and how they feel. We just eat. We go through the rest of our day, we eat again, and then we go to bed and we do it all again. When you actually try and break down after each meal, like, what was my energy like before? What was it like after? What was my digestive system feeling like? How were my bowel movements that day?
Yeah.
Like, literally get interrogative about how your food makes you feel on a deep level.
I still do this now. Like, I like this because I think your gut as well does change over time. And you've spoken about this, like if you've had food poisoning, it can change, you know, quite significantly in a very short space of time, almost instantly. Pregnancy can change the type of the way foods agree with you or don't, or how much you enjoy foods. But yeah, there's so many foods, especially over like the past 5 years, that I've gone, like that doesn't agree with me, or that doesn't agree with me cooked that way. Like broccoli's one. So if I eat boiled broccoli boiled for a long time, fine. I eat it cooked any other way, like it turns my stomach upside down. It's a high FODMAP food. And yeah, so like now when I go somewhere, if they've got it in a food or on a side or in, you know, a couple of other things, I'm like, you know, I'm like aware because I don't want to feel like that like stabbing pain in my stomach afterwards. So yeah, like it's like a continued sort of journey, and it allows you like to make more informed decisions around how ultimately you want to feel.
Yeah, because I think that's something that we easily forget, is that food is such a powerful tool for how we feel, not only day to day, but like compounding month on month, year on year. Your body is literally made of what you eat. Like every cell in your body is from the cells from the food that you put in your mouth. When you think about that, it's kind of mind-blowing that we don't question it and we don't think about it more. We just eat.
Yeah.
Like, if you had an option to optimize what you were putting in your car, you go and you pay a little bit more for the premium petrol. You do if you've got a nice car. Well, you've got a nice body. Like, put the optimum fuel in. But you don't know what that is until you pay attention to how each one makes you feel.
And I think that's the thing to it as well, is there is no one-size-fits-all diet plan. That's why you never hear us say, like, you should only eat this way, or you should only do this, or you should follow this meal plan. There's like principles and stuff, but even in some of those principles, there might be like a tiny bit of it doesn't apply to you. And I think that's just one of those parts of like the perfect meal plan for you is going to be made up of like foods that make you feel your best, foods that make you look your best, give you the best health markers that you enjoy and are tasty and enjoyable to you, and agree with your palate. So it's like there's quite a few factors there, which means like, of course, what I like and you like and the next person is going to be different, and that's fine. You know, health and what diets look like is going to be multifaceted for everyone. Yeah,
definitely. So that's dissatisfaction. We've talked a lot about fullness as well. But what I wanted to bring home on this one is, if you can pay attention to your fullness all you like, if you're not eating foods that promote satiety, you might actually find it really hard to figure out what fullness, the right amount of fullness feels like, because you're not eating foods that give your body a chance. And so this is why we always say, actually, you need to have a basis of food education as well. It's like if you say, oh, I know how to drive, but all you know how to do is like put the car in gear and pull away. That's very different to knowing how to drive in a city, on a motorway, down a back lane. Like you need to understand both parts of the equation, how to intuitively eat, but also how to eat for what your body biologically needs.
Yeah, and this is the issue that I have with it is people are like, oh yeah, you should just intuitively eat, like anti-diet culture, or diet culture is bad and we need to be on this side and people need to just get back in tune with their bodies. But then if you ask, like, if every single person listening to this, when asked 5 people they know, hey, what does healthy eating mean to you? Just ask them, like, what does healthy eating mean to you? You'll get so many varied answers, including your own, will be very different. So everyone has got a different definition of what healthy eating means. So someone says to you, oh, you should intuitively eat and just eat healthy and listen to you. So you're like, oh, okay, I'll go and get avocados, they're healthy foods, or I'll get salmon and all this. And then all of a sudden you're eating in your mind what you view as healthy foods, but have no context of calories or how much portion control or the type of foods that you're eating. And you're like, oh yeah, I'm eating all these healthy foods and I'm listening to my body, but you're eating like 1,500 calories more than your maintenance. So you're gaining like 0.5 pound of body fat a week, which is not healthy. And it's like, okay, so you've been intuitively eating healthy food because you don't have the skill of understanding portion control and the education around food. You're making choices that aren't actually serving your long-term health goals. Mm-hmm. And that's the issue. Like, yes, everything we're talking about can help you get more in tune with your body, but you have to have this baseline education and skill around food first to be successful intuitively eating.
And it is also interwoven because actually the avocado and the salmon will probably be quite filling because they're high in fat and they're whole foods. But if you haven't practiced feeling your fullness yet, it doesn't mean you're going to stop when you're full. Yeah. So you can't do one without the other. Like you really can't separate them out. One of the things that I think is really important to learn in terms of like those nuts and bolts nutrition is which foods genuinely are good for fullness. And that is your high protein foods, high fiber foods, whole foods. They just are harder for your body to digest, so they keep you fuller for longer. The other one which came out quite recently was a study that I saw on social media of all places, but it's a legit study of how your food is prepared. And hot foods are more satiating than cold foods. And high fat foods, which we know already, are higher in satiety.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So there are all these kind of things to start to play around with and do your own little testing and be like, what makes me full? What makes me most satisfied after I've finished a meal? But those baseline things of like protein, fats, fiber, whole foods, you can't really go wrong.
Yeah, definitely.
The next principle of intuitive eating is, this is a good one. This is actually their official wording, challenge the food police, which I really like. So it means get rid of that like good food, bad food mentality.
Yeah, food doesn't have morality. Would that be right? Yeah, it doesn't. Like you can't, like if you eat some pizza, you're not like a bad person. You know what I mean? Or like people say like I have a cheat day, and it's like, all right, well, define cheat, and it's just like basically like you've done something wrong, or you've done someone else wrong, and it's like, oh, have you done yourself wrong? I'm probably messing that up quite a lot.
But like if you looked up the definition of cheat, it's not a good thing.
Yeah, it's just...
So by calling it a cheat meal, you're saying, I've done a not good thing.
Yeah, you've just eaten a pizza, and it's like, pizza's fine, pizza's great, you know what I mean? It's like eating pizza every day, every meal. Yeah, not going to be good, but like, that. Yeah. Most people know that. Eating the odd pizza every now and then, completely fine.
And also there's a scale of pizzas, right? If you make the pizza at home, like actually pizza's fairly balanced if you make it at home and you look at what you put on it. It's can be pretty high in protein if you put some chicken on there, mozzarella.
Well, we got one the other day.
It's not wild.
And it was like, I don't know how big it was. Maybe because I forgot how much they scale up when you add an inch. It was like, maybe it might have only been 20 inches. But it was
only?
Like, yeah, but it was like, it fed like 3 of us, you know what I mean? Because it was just huge. But yeah, like it's labeling food and giving food labels is terrible for your relationship with food. Like all foods are fine, and it's like one salad doesn't make you healthy, just like the way one pizza doesn't make you unhealthy. It's a balance of moderation, and that's a huge part of intuitive eating. It's having a balance of moderation with the foods that you have.
Yeah.
and understanding what that looks like. And I think that's what ties back into like the education. You've got to have that education and skill around food to know what that healthy balance actually looks like.
Yeah. And it is so freeing when you let go of that, like, oh, I messed up because I had this. And you actually go, yeah, I just had that thing and I really fancied it, but it's cool because everything else I ate that day was really nutritious. And as a whole, it was a fine day or a fine week. The other tool that is really helpful, I think, in this area is to just ask, like, how does this food serve me right now? Because all foods serve a purpose. And often the foods that we label bad foods are the foods that we eat for a purpose that isn't like physical hunger. So it's the foods that we eat because they just taste good, or we're out and we want to have a treat because it's like a special occasion.
So Brooke's line's really good here, isn't it? Like if you like it, leave it. If you love it, have it. And I think sometimes we are just eating a lot of foods because we like kind of like it.
Yeah.
A little bit bored, a little bit hungry.
So that can help you assess, like, is this actually going to do the thing that I think it is? Like, make me happy? And the other thing is by asking, like, how is this food serving me right now? If the answer is, it's making me happy, that's also a valid answer. Like, food doesn't always have to just be fuel. And that's where, like, the 80-20 comes in as well. But if every single food choice you make that day is, what does this food do for me? It makes me happy.
Yeah.
Well, maybe things aren't quite in balance. You know, some of them need to say the answer is, it fuels my body. It helps me regenerate my muscle. It does something biologically for me. But sometimes if it just makes you happy, go for it. And don't feel bad about it.
Definitely.
So the food police definitely need to be packed out of town. We don't like them around here either. Okay, so the next principle is cope with your emotions without food. We've kind of touched on this already.
Yeah.
Like, there are lots of tools, physical versus psychological hunger, blasted, but basically just becoming more self-aware.
But yeah, that's the first part. It's just like asking yourself, when are your emotions making you turn to food? And even just recognizing that is the first step. And yeah, you become more self-aware. And then the goal is like, you're not just going to try one new thing. Like, hey, right, next time I get like really emotional and I like want to go and get chocolate, right, just recognizing that. That's like step one. Oh, cool, right, so you've got that. When's that happening? How often is that happening? Is it happening every day, every week, multiple times a week, every month? Is it at certain points? And then you can start to get curious about what's a different strategy I could apply to help feel that emotion in a different way other than just, because all you're doing with food, if it's a state changer. So if chocolate's pleasurable to you and you're in a stress state, okay, you're stressed. Give me the chocolate, eat the chocolate, chocolate's pleasurable. Your state changes, and that's what you're looking for. You're looking for a state changer in that time. But there's many ways you can change your state that don't involve food. And if you get curious about what they are, it could be calling a friend, it could be watching some comedy, it could be going for a walk. There's many, many other things that you could try. They're going to be the things that change your state but don't involve calories and excess consumption of food, which is often also followed by like guilt and shame and probably not feeling that great from a sugar high. So yeah, awareness is key.
Yeah, and having that kind of go-to list of things you can do to change your state is really, really helpful. The other thing that we work with our clients is called breaking the chain. So it's working backwards from that moment of wanting to change your state. Like, what is that thing that is every week you get to that point where you're so stressed you reach for the bar of chocolate? There's probably a common theme. There's probably a pattern. Like, for some people, it's feeling time pressure. For some people, it's a certain person at work. Like, there will be a running thread. And when you recognize what your triggers are, you can start to have, right, when this person speaks to me, I will always go outside for a walk afterwards. So you break that chain of like letting them get to you, get under your skin, and then you're just building up, and then you go for the chocolate bar like an hour later. You break that chain way before it even happens. So looking back through your days and thinking like, when did I make food choices that I wasn't overly pleased with, right? What was the common thread? That can really help you identify what you can change and feel more in control of everything, like not just your eating, but your stress levels, your reactiveness to other people. How many of our clients have said, people at work have really noticed a change in me. Like, they say I'm not that ratty anymore because they've started to be aware of the impact of everything on them, and they choose to react differently now.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah.
It's a great life tool as well.
Yes. Number 8 is respect your body. I think it goes without saying that's like one of our core principles. And actually, eating in a way that respects your body is eating healthy. Self-care, self-love, respecting your body, whatever you want to call it. Eating healthy food is that. It's not like intuitive eating. If you were truly doing it to respect your body, you would choose healthy foods.
You would, yeah, 100%. Because we all know, like, if you're eating highly processed foods, or you're eating the chocolate all the time, or you're eating drive-throughs or takeouts all the time, like we're not soft. Like, we know that's not the best decisions for us to make, but we're choosing to continually make them. So having respect for yourself and for your body, which is something I believe we all strive for, is exactly what we should be going for. You're respecting your body, respecting the food choices that you make, and making the time to respect your food choices by learning about food is another part of that.
The one thing I would say is, though, so many clients I've worked with, they don't believe, or they don't have that level of self-respect or self-worthiness to instinctively do this. So whereas if I said to them, like, would you feed your child a diet that looks like yours? They're like, oh, God, no. And I'm like, but you're doing that to your body. Yeah. And then there's that moment where they're like, it's just, if for some people, you need to actually step back and be like, if I was really truly responsible for a precious human body, like a child that is under my care, would I do this to them? And if the answer is no, you yourself deserve as much respect as anyone else that you would take a better job of their nutrition.
100%, yeah. I mean, that's ultimately what like self-sabotaging comes down to. It's just a lack of self-worth. And you really gotta sit with that sometimes. Like, why do I not think I'm worthy enough to eat this good food, or to spend this money on myself, or invest this time or resources into myself? Like, you 100% are. Like, you should be your number one priority, because when your cup's full, you can pour it back into everyone else's. And that's a hard concept to get sometimes, if you've always been, your cup's been empty and you're filling everyone else's up. But like, that'll catch up with you. It really will.
Yeah. And the last two principles of intuitive eating, we're not going to go into too much depth on, because they're not really about eating, but exercise for how it feels and honor your health. Again, I think it's fair to say we're on board with all of those. Yeah. So when it comes to intuitive eating, it does sound like one of these topics that if people didn't know anything about us, they'd be like, well, Body Smart must be the complete opposite end of the scale, because all they talk about is weight loss. Actually, we want everybody to intuitively eat, but we want them to have the knowledge around food that goes together with the intuitive eating skill set. And that is what makes our graduates unstoppable. That's why they feel like they genuinely are in control of their food for the first time ever, because they understand the principles and they understand how to implement.
Yeah. And that's it. That's the winning formula. You have the education, you have the skill, and you've got... you understand your hunger and fullness cues, and then that means no matter what situation you're in, you're able to make informed decisions that align with your body.
And it also helps with your relationship with yourself, because as we said at the beginning, you can then start to trust yourself, because you're not relying on other people's rules. You're not second guessing everything. You're not trying to think like, oh, is this healthy or isn't this healthy? You know the facts and you know what works for you. And like, it's so freeing to not question every little decision. Yeah. And I honestly, we do want this for all of our graduates. It is literally a non-negotiable. You can't graduate if you can't do this. And that's why, because that sense of mental freedom and food freedom, it can only be achieved with those two elements.
It can. So get to work, learn your skills, get the hunger rainbow out, and it'd be good. Learn how to intuitively eat, but like with those principles in place, because it's liberating, it's freeing, it makes food so much more enjoyable. You feel great, you look great, and it's a skill for life. And
then you are that person that other people look at and go, oh, she never has to worry about food.
Yeah.
Hope you'll agree that intuitive eating is definitely a skill that we would all love to master. And particularly when it comes to keeping any weight you lose off, it is priceless. It's one of the things that we covered in episode number 90 with one of our lovely guests, T. She came on and talked about her own weight loss journey, but actually for her, getting a handle on emotional eating and learning how to have that healthier relationship with food was a key to her success. So if you haven't already listened, it's episode 90 with Teresa O'Callaghan, and she is just so down to earth. She's got so many practical tips of how she actually made those mindset